There are two things that I love when it comes to making DBD content: playing Deathslinger and teaching people new things. However, over the course of the last year, and especially in the last few months, both playing and teaching people how to play Deathslinger has started to become more difficult. This is because of one simple thing. Behavior keeps adding invisible walls and hitboxes to locations that used to not have them, and never should have had them in the first place. There are also a few consistent game-breaking bugs that plague his kit currently, and despite the efforts of other Deathslinger mains, these bugs have not even been remotely addressed in months. In a recent Reddit thread, Late Night Nomad pointed out a myriad of problems that currently plague the killer, and Behavior's response was to send us bug logs. Not clips, not detailed forum posts pointing out exactly what has been going wrong with this killer, logs, which also aren't attainable if you're playing on console. I know that I'm pretty biased in this case, but I don't know of any other killer in this game that has required that precise of an external input to make their character totally playable. Anyway, the first of these bugs is the ADS animation bug, where the survivor will not see the animation of Deathslinger aiming down his sights. This first popped up around March or April of this year and has not been fixed as of July 2025. Not only is this extremely annoying for the survivor, but it actually makes playing Slinger more difficult. A significant portion of Slinger's skill comes from being able to make predictive shots, and you can't predict shots at range if the survivor isn't even aware they should be dodging. I happen to lead my shots out of habit a lot of the time, but now with this animation bug, I don't know if the survivor didn't attempt to dodge because they were hoping I'd miss, or if they genuinely didn't see me aiming down sights. Secondly, ever since the Blood Moon event this year, spear shots have a seemingly random chance to just bounce off of survivors.
What?
It doesn't matter if they're out in the open, behind a corner, through a gap, holding still, moving, low ping on a specific server, on a specific map, at high or low FPS. Realistically, the only thing I can imagine is that this bug is the result of the terrible desync issues that everyone has been suffering, since it similarly plagues Huntress as well. Shy, a Twitch partner Huntress main and a shining beacon of the DBD community, showed her post-month reset grades with barely any matches played on killer side because of how bugged Huntress is currently. Third bug: if Caleb gets pallet stunned while holding his sights down, his sights will remain stuck until he presses his power button again. This is a very easy bug to replicate, and it's more of an annoyance than anything, but it still hasn't been addressed. All of that pales in comparison to the most consistent and frustrating bug of them all: invisible walls. Deathslinger as a character very much prides himself on being able to properly time and aim precise shots, sometimes over impossible obstacles, or sometimes through gaps scarcely wider than your thumb. Actually landing these shots takes a lot of dedicated practice. As a P100 player, finding and being able to use these angles in a practical manner is half of the fun and relative strength of the killer, at least for me. In my controversial Why Deathslinger Should Be 115% video, I failed to acknowledge that Slinger does not play by the same conventional rules that other 110 killers do. His deceptively difficult skill ceiling and deceptively high skill floor allows him to be soul-crushing in 1v1 scenarios, to the point where the most effective strategy is to avoid engagements at all costs and hold W away from him. I mean, technically it's not a skill floor, you just aim and shoot and reel, but that first step up in your gameplay is a big one. I'm moving on. Knowing how to bend the fabric of reality is core to this character, not just because it makes him look cool, but because it informs the player on how to use his kit to its full potential. Knowing that you were able to shoot through gaps like this allows you to also know that it's possible to make easier shots like this. The rule of thumb here would, naturally, seem to be, if you can see through it, you can shoot through it. Granted, you need to be pretty precise, but it's still the rule. Deathslinger's biggest strength comes from precision, but his entire power relies on visual consistency. He is the definition of high risk, high reward, where the high risk is the cooldown that he suffers for missing, but the high reward is how much time he saves by using his power precisely. If he takes a less risky shot, chances are that he still reaps the reward, but it's the risk that makes him exciting and even stronger. Point is, the skill floor of the character is knowing how to shoot, and the skill ceiling is knowing what you can shoot through and when to line that shot up. The actual ability to line these shots up changes between maps, making his skill ceiling basically as high as the map count itself goes, and being able to land these narrow gap shots should clearly indicate the more obvious shots you can take, or so you'd think. This invisible wall on Ormond appeared around the 8.1.0 update, when variants for the map were introduced almost a year ago. This shot itself was moderately tough to land, since it required a lack of awareness from the survivor, similar to how I can land shots through Shack reliably. A well-timed stutter step can mess up my timing. The counterplay for this gap is pretty simple on both sides. Deathslinger aims to fire through, survivor takes a slight stutter step or crouches, Deathslinger then holds and adjusts his aim to account for the stutter step or strafes in closer, the survivor takes advantage of the worsened angle and gains distance away. It's a hell of a lot more interesting than playing against Nurse, anyway. I have to reiterate that while these gap shots are definitely part of what makes Deathslinger strong, it is all that his power does. Without this gap here, this tile becomes virtually unplayable, and I often have to leave it when I see survivors running to it. And thus, Mount Ormond Resort becomes a more difficult map than it already is for the killer. And if you're wondering why it's tough for Deathslinger, it's because it's a big, open, bright map with a smattering of filler palettes that are tough to impossible to use your power on, combined with an obnoxious main building and a now broken hitbox and one of the easiest tiles to run a 110% killer on. And if it was only Mount Ormond, I'd be fine with that and shrug it off as more reason to hate the map, but it's not just Ormond. On Larry's Memorial Institute or the Treatment Theater, this entire corner is impenetrable. You can shoot over the chair legs here, but not under the stool, nor under this clear gap beneath this medical equipment. Azerov's resting place, while there are several incremental gap shots you can make around the map, including this one underneath the shovel, you cannot shoot through this window on the main building. I don't know why. Yamaoka Estate's shack building. This hole in the parchment paper is fine, but this one right next to it isn't. Toba Landing Shack has this pipe that juts out from the wall, and it makes this 45-degree shot impossible because of this invisible hitbox. But strangely enough, you can land the shot going back the other way, but not if you're at the window itself. Greenville Square, Badham Preschool, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza all have this tri-pronged tree with an invisible wall placed at its center. Freddy Fazbear's picnic tables also have abnormally high hitboxes on them, has never had the ability to shoot through the ball pit, and the goopy wall in the kitchen and ball pit room have only 2 holes you can shoot through out of several apparent ones. Mother's Dwelling and Temple of Purgation have finicky hitboxes on their larger trees and bushes, as does Garden of Joy. As of the 9.0.2 update though, fellow Deathslinger main JakeSlay discovered that you can't shoot through or even over the railings on Garden of Joy's main building. The hitbox itself seems to extend to the top leaf of this flower box across any of the fencing on this main building, and this is another example in a long list of shots that you should be able to take, and I myself have video evidence somewhere of landing, I know I do. Not to mention that railings have never been a problem for Slinger before, and they still aren't. Maps like The Game, the Yamaoka maps, Raccoon City, Eyrie of Crows, Dead Dog, any of those maps with railings have never had this problem. They still don't have this problem. It's just Garden of Joy. Even then, Dead Dog does have one shot that doesn't work on its shack building out of the several that do, which seems oddly poetic. You know, it's Deathslinger's home map, but even his home map is working against him slightly. But one map that has absolutely changed for the worse, though, is the Raccoon City maps. On the East Wing specifically, you used to be able to shoot over the air conditioning vents. Not anymore. But on other maps, you can still shoot over rocks of similar size. The vertical hitboxes on these boxes are pretty generous, too. On the fire exit side, you used to be able to tag someone at the generator here. Now there's a giant hitbox that extends all the way to the end of this empty fenced-in area. The bars on this section closer to the main door and exit gate also used to be penetrable, but worst of all is this angle here. Now this shot should still be possible, and at a certain point the actual invisible wall here is, well, a bit excessive. Now I can understand if the hitbox for the wall was a little bit off and I was misaiming off of the pillar, but I mean, look how far out I'm aiming to land this specific shot to just have it rejected. And I have hit shots on survivors rounding corners all the time, partially because of latency and partially because of the way that hitboxes work. And I also know that this shot was possible because the main guide I used to learn how to play Deathslinger showcases this exact shot during the tutorial segment on chain manipulation. Another Deathslinger main, Elemental of Dark, discovered that the divider bars on these windows in RPD also have massive hitboxes for really no apparent reason, and yet despite all of that, you can still shoot underneath these blinds. And these are just examples I can think of off the top of my head or that I remember that somebody showed to me. I'm sure that more Deathslinger players can corroborate more examples that I haven't discovered yet or can't recall at the moment. Either way, for as frustrating as Deathslinger can be to play against, it is equally as annoying to have to remember every map-specific exception, lessening both his only strength and skill expression. With how slow the character already is, it is genuinely awful to know that his strength slips with every patch, making him less fun for veterans and less intuitive for newcomers. I still love playing him, but given how long these bugs have persisted, given how often new ones crop up, and given the primary response that we've received in regards to fixing the interactions with his power, I don't know how much longer I'll be able to stomach my favorite character being sidelined. There are two things that I love when it comes to creating DBD content, and one of them is becoming unsustainable due to long-term abandonment. Thank you for listening to my rant. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.